Okay, so today, who has seen or heard about SB 1217? All right, so Senate Bill 1217, I don't have the timelines. It's been initiated a couple months ago. It's been being pushed through. It just got popular when it passed the House and was going, passed the Oklahoma Senate and was going in front of the House. Agents started talking about it. And so, and it kind of got popular online for a little bit. So we're going to talk about what it does, what it doesn't do, and what we don't know if it does yet, because it's a law and laws are ambiguous and they have to be legislated, or not legislated, they have to be tried before a judge can really come in and make a ruling on something ambiguous sometimes. So what we're going to do in this class is we're going to talk about the NAR settlement, what happened, why we're here, how we're here. Then we're going to talk about what the bill says, and then we're going to talk about best practices going forward with what the bill, because the bill was signed on the 5th, I think, so it was signed last week. So it is going into effect in November, so we're going to talk about what to do now that it's going into effect. So how did we get here? Who remembers, who's been licensed since 2014? Who got licensed between now and 2024? Who's newish to all this? Handful, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so most people remember. I had AI draw this up because I thought it was funny. I was looking for something to do in the beginning. So this is what everyone was like before, right? Everyone's happy, we're collaborating, we're shaking hands, and then this is what it's like after. It's like everyone's, right? And so it's like, yeah. Everyone thought the world was ending. Everyone thought commissions were going away. Everyone thought all this stuff was going to happen. What really happened was basically nothing. It was an extra document and an extra conversation that like 70% of the company or the agents had to have. 30% were already having it and already doing it. And so it was a very mild transition, in my opinion. Creates some extra conversations. I think it accomplished some of what they wanted to accomplish, and I think it fell short of what it wanted to in other ways also. So what happened, just for everyone's recap, because you have to kind of understand what happened to know why this bill exists. So the old way is that cooperation was advertised on the MLS. Who remembers back in the old days when you could see, as 21 months ago. So 21 months ago, you used to be able to see this listing offers 3%. This listing offers 2%. This listing offers $1,000. Whatever it might be, right? You could see what that listing offered. Some agents looked at it religiously before they sent any listing to any client. Some didn't look at it at all. But what you agreed to pay your buyer agent was in the MLS, down in the finance section by the agent. So what used to happen is the seller and the listing agent would get a listing agreement and it would write out how much I'm paying in buyer commission. Then they would put that on the MLS, which is what was called the offer of compensation, a unilateral offer of compensation. And then the MLS, through your code of conduct and your code of ethics and all that stuff and your subscriber agreements, would obligate you to pay what you advertised in the MLS to whoever brought the buyer. So you were the MLS kind of played police sometimes. And if you guys argued over a commission, you'd go in front of the OAR and dispute who gets the commission. And you might have heard of procuring cause. We'd argue that. So listing agent would negotiate buyer compensation with the seller, advertise it in the MLS, and then there might be a buyer-broker agreement. Probably 70% of the time there was not a buyer-broker agreement in previous. And then the offer of compensation would happen in the MLS. So that's the old way, if that makes sense. The new way is that the co-op cannot be listed in the MLS. That's a violation of the settlement. And then that a BBA is required before showing houses. So this is the new way. Seller and listing agent agree on listing compensation only. This is what I'm going to be paid for listing your house. Buyer and buyer broker agree on the selling compensation only. This is what I'm going to charge to be your buyer agent. If you ask what's the commission, they're going to tell you put it in the offer. We don't have it, or I'm not supposed to tell you because it creates liability. So you put it in the offer. And then when we have a contract, it all comes together in the contract. So the biggest difference is that we're not sharing cooperation anymore, at least advertising what it is. Whoops. You have to outline your cooperation with the buyer as the buyer agent, and then all of it goes in the contract. It now becomes a term of the contract that is negotiated and agreed to by the buyer and the seller. So that's how we've been operating since August of 2024. Everything's in the contract, none of it's listed anywhere. Does anyone even call listing agents anymore and ask what they're offering? Doesn't matter, right? Put it in the offer. Doesn't matter. So that was everyone's fear, is like, well, what if they're offering 4 and I don't write 4 and I write 3 and I lose? It's just write it up. And so there are some situations, kind of like Dan and Kim were talking about, when there's builder bonuses and stuff like that, where you have to have certain conversations, do certain paperwork. But the majority of the time, the seller continues to pay whatever the buyer agent asks because they want it to be sold and because they factored that fee in at their closing costs in the beginning anyway, and it's been pretty smooth. There's been very little roadblocks, very little hiccups. It's mostly worked how it has prior. It's just not advertised, and buyer broker has to exist now. Very small. Felt like a huge change at the time because it felt like an attack on commissions. It wasn't. It was an attempt to create transparency in buyer fees. So the main reason, let me see. So the reason that the lawsuit came about is because lawsuit said that advertising MLS creates unfair treatment to listings. If I'm only offering 2%, that creates an unfair treatment of agents because this other one's offering 3 and the agent's going to go show that one. The other thing is it creates anti-competitive practices because the seller and the listing broker are negotiating this person's payment. So the seller has 0 negotiating power on what this person gets paid, and that creates anti-competitive. They're saying these prices are fixed. Now, whether they are or not, you can argue a million different ways, but that was what the argument said, is because this person and this person can't negotiate it, it's fixed by this person. And that was the crux of the argument. It creates anti-competitive pricing, and it creates unfair treatment towards sellers that don't fall in line and pay what they're supposed to pay, is the argument. So the real problem was cooperation, not compensation. So everyone freaked out because we thought it was an attack on compensation. It's really an attack on cooperation. Listing agents shouldn't be negotiating buyer agent commissions. Buyer agents should be negotiating buyer agent commissions. That was the whole. Realtors sharing their commissions is what creates liability and what I believe violates the spirit of the agreement. So once all this came out, there was a million ways, like you can do business this way and this is a loophole and I can still keep doing this because I'm used to it. And I think sometimes we're doing stuff because we used to do it, but it violates the spirit of the agreement. The spirit of the agreement was to get rid of buyer commission cooperation in commission. Me negotiating the buyer agent's commission up front is what caused this whole thing. So stop doing it, because there's either gonna be another lawsuit that takes another 400 billion or whatever the hell, I can't remember, 417 million, or you're gonna get personally named in a lawsuit, or if you're violating what the rules or the spirit of the agreement, someone else can come after you and you can say, oh, it's a gray area, it doesn't say I can't do this, but they're gonna argue that it violates the spirit of the agreement and you can find yourself in trouble. So the decoupling of commissions and stopping of the cooperation of commissions, meaning I'm charging 6 and I'm giving 3 of my 6, that's cooperation. That's decoupling of the commissions. Does that make sense? What we're trying to do here? So again, compensation's fine. The cooperation is what's wrong. We want to decouple the commissions, and that's why Copper Creek's stance has always been to only negotiate your listing side commission in your listing agreement. Set the expectation that the buyer is going to want, 2 to 3% commission. So let's factor that in as an expense that we're going to expect. But I'm only charging you X for my fees, and then we'll see what they offer at the time. I always compared this to if you've been in the industry for a real long time, 2015, 16, when they took TRR prices off the contract. You used to be able to negotiate TRR repairs on the contract before we ever inspected the property. And they took it off because it makes no sense. You're just handcuffing buyers and sellers to an arbitrary number because everyone either put 500 or 1,500, and that's it, regardless of the house or the age or anything. And then now a buyer and a seller is handcuffed to this anchored price for no reason at all. Same exact concept. Why are we negotiating someone's fee before they've done any work, brought any offers, or done anything at all? Makes no sense. Let's save that for when that work happens. So that's the idea. We're decoupling listing agent commissions and buyer agent commissions. That was the whole point of the argument. So what the NAR settlement was, $418 million paid over 4 years. You may have noticed your NAR dues increase a little bit. That's because of this. The settlement releases any liability of all NAR members. So everyone was like, screw it, NAR, I want out of NAR now. And if you leave NAR, you lose liability coverage. I think for the next, how many years you have to be in it? 7 years. You have to continue to stay under the NAR umbrella for the next 7 years. Otherwise, you could lose coverage under this settlement. And then the NAR continues to deny any wrongdoing. So those were the terms of the agreement. We write a $418 million check. The attorneys get $280 million of it. And then the poor plaintiffs each get $97 each. And so changes that affected, really all that happened was we remove compensation from the MLS, and we have to get written agreements prior to touring homes. Written agreement is a term that is defined legally, and then touring homes is a term that is defined legally. So these are broad things, but they're defined in the settlement. Working with a buyer and touring a home is providing any brokerage or services to the buyer. So working with a buyer is anything that's a licensable activity or brokerage services. We did a training on brokerage duties 2 months ago, I think. So touring homes, providing any in-person or virtual tour, if the person's there or not. If you're doing a virtual tour, that's touring a home, of any residential property of 1 to 4 units. So if you're showing multifamily, 5 or more units, you don't need it. If you're showing commercial, you don't need it. Just residential is very targeted. And so if you're touring a home, you need a written agreement. So what is a written agreement? I guess we'll talk about listing agreements first. So the listing agreements must, there's 2 things that had to go into a listing agreement. You must disclose in conspicuous language that the broker commissions are not set by law and fully negotiable, and disclose to the seller the amount of compensation being offered to the buyer's broker. Again, previously, we just charged one amount, and then I got to decide how much I share with the buyer's agent, if you remember the listing agreements pre-August 2024. So now the listing agreements break out. X dollars is going to listing agent, X dollars is going to buying agent. If there is no buying agent, X dollars goes to me, and it breaks out all the scenarios so that the seller has transparency in what they're paying who. That was a big piece of it. So the written agreement, call it whatever you want. We call it a buyer-broker agreement, but the written agreement must have four different statements, sections, yeah. So first, it must specify and conspicuously disclose the amount of compensation the agent will receive from any source, and how this amount will be determined. So a percentage or an amount that you're going to receive for this commission. It must disclose the amount of compensation must be objectively ascertainable and may not be open-ended. So you can't say whatever the seller's offering. That's not ascertainable because we don't know. We're not buying a house yet. I don't know what that's going to be. Is it a $400,000 house and I'm getting 12, or is it 3 and 9? What's the price of the house I'm buying? It's not ascertainable. But they allow you to put a percentage, but you can't say whatever the house sells. So it must be ascertainable. So it can't be, we'll agree on it later. It can't be whatever the seller provides. It can't be, it has to be ascertainable at the time of the contract. The third thing is it must include a statement that the agent may not receive compensation from any other source that exceeds the amount agreed to in the buyer. So this is a big thing. If you say, I'm only going to charge you, buyer, 2%, I can't go accept 3% from the seller. So I can only accept what I agree to in my buyer-broker agreement. So if I'm buying a builder and they have a 1% bonus, I cannot accept that without some sort of amendment and agreement signed by your clients that you're receiving more than what was in the buyer agreement. And there's a whole lot off of that creates potential liability if you do modify your buyer-broker agreement to increase the cost. There's risk there about doing that. But you cannot receive any more money than what is stated in the buyer-broker agreement. And then disclose in conspicuous language that the buyer commissions are not set by law and fully negotiable. So we have to fully outline the amount. It must be ascertainable. I can't receive any more than I tell you. And I have to tell you that it's not set by law. Those are the 4 stipulations that must be in all written agreements. So all of our buyer-broker agreements, if you use the special Copper Creek one that we created, All of these stipulations are in ours. It's in the new OREC one. And so this is what written agreement is before touring a home. All makes sense. We should all kind of know these things. I also wasn't sure if everyone knew these things. That's why I wanted to cover these. It's important to know what to do. It's as important to know why we do them, so that we don't violate the spirit of the agreement or get funny with the rules and then step on a landmine. So that was the main changes. Those 4 stipulations. We remove MLS compensation from the MLS, and then we require a written agreement, and every written agreement has to have these 4 things in it. So supposedly, OREC lobbied this bill with our state legislators, claiming they've received complaints from consumers that they're being forced to sign contracts before seeing homes. Agents are not explaining what happened properly because they didn't come to these trainings and they don't know what happened and why. And they're forcing people, and consumers are complaining. So OREC lobbies the legislator to do something about it. Legislator goes out and creates this 2-paragraph bill, very, very short bill. The bill says, a broker shall not be required to enter into a brokerage agreement with a buyer prior to showing real estate. Section B says, a managing broker or proprietor broker may choose to require that someone enter into a brokerage agreement with a buyer prior to showing real estate. So it says a broker shall not be required to, but a broker can still require their people to if they want to. That's what it's saying. You don't have to, but if you want to, you have the ability to. That's what the law did. So the whole purpose of this was to nullify the settlement agreement. So inside the 109-page settlement agreement, I think, 190, 109, something like that, there's a stipulation, paragraph 58, section 6, if you want to go find it, that says, unless inconsistent with state or federal law, the people must do these things. So OREC and the legislators' attempt was to create a law that becomes inconsistent with the settlement so that we don't have to do them anymore. Make sense? Because this settlement can't supersede state law. So they tried to create state law that can supersede the settlement so that we don't have to anymore. That was the attempt. That's what we're trying to accomplish. So the million-dollar question is this law inconsistent, or does it deem the settlement inconsistent with this new law? That's the question. The answer is we don't know yet. You can argue it both ways. You can argue that it clearly says I can't be required to do it. But then an attorney I spoke with argued that truly being inconsistent means I can't do both at the same time. And there is a world where a brokerage can still require you to do it. So that means you are complying with the settlement and complying with the law at the same time. So it's not inconsistent, right? If it's truly inconsistent, I could not do both at the same time. So their opinion is it is not inconsistent. So what that creates, you may have seen, I know Dan, you were involved in some of this a little bit in the conversation, OAR came out with an amendment, a recommended amendment, while it was in front of the House to approve, the Oklahoma State House. Their amendment was to change it to say, a broker shall not enter into an agreement with a buyer prior to showing real estate. So OAR recommended, Oklahoma Association of Realtors recommended, to change it to saying you cannot enter into an agreement. That would truly create inconsistency between the settlement and state law. So I think their opinion, let me finish my thought and I'll come back. Their opinion was, if we're gonna do it, let's do it. Let's create true inconsistency so that we can accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. People can argue that this does not accomplish what we're trying to accomplish, which is it does not create inconsistency with the new state law and the settlement. So OAR came out and made this, they sent out an email to every member of OAR, you probably got the email maybe, and then they made a big post on Facebook, they did a video, they did a little campaign. But the frustrating part was they never even filed that amendment. They never even actually put it in front of the creators of the bill to try to get it on the floor to discuss. They just made a big posture about what their intentions were and what they wanted to do. So I don't know what, I think your term was politics is afoot. So I don't know what happened, but that was their intention and that's what their stated intention. What was your question?
Yeah, with what OAR put out, I can't remember if it
Okay.
Am I crazy? Did that exist? Okay. And that to me made a little bit more sense because then it's on the consumer and not us.
Yeah.
So I can't remember who put that out there. Do you remember?
It was a president of something.
Okay.
I saw an email too, like a member of the public cannot be required.
Right.
Yes.
Was it Brian Shepard?
Was it?
Was that did I misquote their amendment? Was their amendment that says their amendment said a broker should not be required, right?
The way I understand it, what passed makes it sort of optional, right? The brokerage can't be required by anybody to get these deals prior to showing. But as a managing broker, you can make it a matter of policy for your agents.
Yeah.
The amendment OAR was pushing was to outright ban it and say you may not, as a matter of law, get these
Require it.
written agreements
Yeah.
just to show houses. So theirs is a little bit more extreme because there's that 30% that you talked about who've been doing this for a very long time. And so those guys were obviously very upset.
And it takes
because
choice
they-
away from the broker if
Correct.
I want my people to do it. Yeah.
Yep. So this gives the broker the choice.
So this gives broker the choice, but it doesn't create full 100% inconsistency in some people's opinion. And at the end of the day, this is the frustrating thing about any law or any contract or anything at all, is no one can say. The only person who can say is if it's litigated, it goes in front of a judge. The judge will make a determination. Even if the state attorney general comes out and makes an opinion, it can still be litigated in front of a judge, and a judge uses that attorney general opinion as guidance, but they can rule on it however they want. The judge sets the law. So this hasn't been tested judicially, and we don't know if it's inconsistent or not. And I don't want Copper Creek to be the one that gets this tested judicially. And so we're going to comply as much as we can. I'll show you our recommendations at the end. But that was kind of the amendment back and forth. And the whole purpose, it's important to understand the purpose of the bill, was to specifically combat the agreement, the settlement agreement, to try to render it inconsistent and render it null so we can go back to doing whatever the brokerage implies, or whatever the brokerage suggests you do as a real estate agent, or whatever you choose to do. So that's where I think the language creates a little more ambiguity than they wanted it to be. It can be argued either way if it's consistent or inconsistent, and I think that's what OAR's attempt was to try to make it more consistent.
I found it. If you want me to read it off.
Is it OAR's or is it okay? What's their
That's what I was
exact?
thinking of.
Yeah.
It said, a broker shall not require a member of the public to enter into a written agreement with the broker prior to touring real estate or purchase, lease, auction.
Yeah, but it still puts the requirement on the broker, not the consumer.
Yes, it just flipped the verbiage with written agreement with the buyer to written agreement with the broker. That's what I was thinking in my head. I think that's
Okay.
what we were thinking. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So
Have a buyer sign a piece of paper that says they refuse to sign the other piece of paper.
you can.
I'm just saying.
I don't think so. No, if you don't get it, you can't show, or you can show. You're violating the settlement, and you're opening yourself up to $418 million lawsuit. Is what happens if you violate these new settlement agreements. So no, that is incorrect. We'll edit that out. So here's the problem with everything that has happened with the new bill and with the agreement is it must be judicially tested. This doesn't actually do anything. We don't know. And so right now, if you want to continue to receive coverage under the NAR settlement, then you will continue to comply with the NAR settlement guidelines. Everything we've been doing the last 21 months. If you start to act however you want and it comes out that this is not inconsistent, now you're opening yourself up personally liable, you, not your brokerage, but you personally liable to a lawsuit for violating antitrust laws. So the other problem and kind of what we're waiting on, and this will kind of be a big indicator of how we're going to move forward, I think, is when MLSOK and their counsel, their general counsel and their attorneys are going to tell us what their opinion is. Does this create consistency or inconsistency? Because even if we think it creates inconsistency and we don't want to do it anymore, the MLS still has rules. And you can get fined $2,500 every time you show a house without a buyer-broker agreement. Per event, no limit. So if you show 100 houses to someone, It goes up that much. That's how much you owe. So even if we think it's inconsistent, if the MLS thinks it is consistent and it can still comply, then you still have to comply with the MLS guidelines. NAR guidelines, OAR guidelines, MLS OK guidelines. So again, the MLS is currently in conversations with their general counsel, their outside counsel, attorneys, trying to figure out what their opinion is based on the settlement, based on the new law, and based on their current guidelines, what they're going to advise. So they will come out eventually and give us some guidance.
So how does this affect if you have that agreement and then you have hired a showing assistant? Doesn't that matter?
So the agreements with the brokerage, if that showing assistant's under the brokerage, they're compliant.
Showing assistant has to be brokerage.
Yeah, if they're with a different brokerage, then you have to have some sort of agreement that says you're hiring out them to work under the brokerage. So yeah, that's important. Listing agreements, buyer-broker agreements, everything is owned by the brokerage. You are signing these things as a representative of the broker. So if Dan has a listing, I can go show it and I don't need a buyer-broker agreement because I'm doing services for the seller under the brokerage. And if I have a buyer, you can go show my buyer because you're under the brokerage and the agreements with the brokerage. When you get someone outside the brokerage to show, then it creates, they don't have an agreement with that brokerage. Everyone here is acting on behalf of the broker. And so everything is with the broker, every agreement's with the broker, all that. And so everyone's acting on behalf.
So on that one, we can just real quick, on that listing that I had where the agent wouldn't take the person in, so that just wasn't.
Yeah,
It
so
never happened.
Pam, if I remember correctly, Pam had a buyer, needed to see a house, couldn't show it. The listing agent wouldn't, or
I was
you
the
were,
listing agent.
and you were asking,
I was asking someone outside of our brokerage.
oh, okay, yeah,
if
okay,
they
I had it
could
backwards.
anyone-
Yeah, so
Yeah.
Pam needed to show her listing and asked someone else outside the brokerage to show it. If we give her permission to act on our behalf, she does not need a BBA, in my opinion. But that agent's broker was saying, you can't open that house up because you don't have a buyer-broker agreement with that random buyer. But I don't think they were providing brokerage services to that buyer, and so they were providing co-op
They wanted
services to us.
They wanted to provide the broker service
Yeah,
to the
yeah,
buyer.
yeah. That's a weird situation. I disagreed with the broker, but that's a weird situation. So again, important to understand. One, this doesn't go into effect until November, so pretend it doesn't even exist yet. Two, if you want to continue to receive personal coverage under the liability, you'll continue to comply with NAR, OAR, OKMAR, MLS OK guidelines because they're the ones who require it. And then the MLS OK will give us some opinion, hopefully, in the near future with what their opinion is, and then that'll be what we have to comply with because we are all members of MLS. So the other argument is that nothing can require a broker to do it, but if you're joining an association, that's a voluntary decision you're making, and you have to comply with that voluntary decision's guidelines, even over and above whatever state guidelines are. So that's where, again, I don't know if it does create inconsistency or not. You could argue it both ways. So MLS will give us opinion. MLS rules still require BBA, so you still need them. And the other thing is you still can't get, again, according to MLS NAR guideline rules, you still cannot get paid more than what's in a buyer-broker agreement. So going forward, until you hear any other kind of guidance from your brokerage, we're going to continue to need them. One, because the law is not in effect, but two, we're going to make a legal business decision, compliance decision, whether or not to comply with it or not. But for now, we're all doing BBAs, we're all doing everything the exact same we've been doing for the last 21 months. Nothing's changed.
When you said that earlier, like if we meet with the buyer and we say 3%, and then we go show a DR Horton home and they give us a bonus, you're saying you can't accept that?
So the question is, if we have a BBA signed and it says 3%, and then we go show a builder and the builder's offering an extra $5,000 or whatever, can we modify our agreement to accept that extra $5,000? Yes, we've done that in the past. You have to get a new agreement signed. I think you have to void your existing and get a new one signed. The risk, and I haven't seen this played out, but 21 months ago when everyone's making up scenarios, right, and trying to litigate fake scenarios, we came up with there's I don't know, state law, or not state law, just basic kind of case law, contract law that says you can't modify pricing without modifying the scope of work, or you could be considered, I don't know what the terminology was, I can't remember. Basically, if you're going to increase the pricing, you need to change the scope of work, is the idea. So if we're not doing anything different, we're just cranking it up, then I think you could be in violation of the agreement. However, I think if you get the old agreement withdrawn or canceled, and then get a new agreement signed up and the buyer is okay and understand, the whole purpose of this is disclosure, transparency. So if you're achieving disclosure and transparency, I think you're probably fine. But nothing's 100%. There is an argument there that says you're just gouging a buyer because you can. That money could go back to the buyer, but you're taking it instead, beyond what you said.
Say, well, you're pushing me toward this builder because you get an extra $5,000 and I'm not like this one.
That's the risk. Or the buyer could say, hey, why don't we put that towards my interest rate? And you could be like, damn, okay, let's do that, I guess. And so but if it's full disclosure, it's full transparency, and they understand, do what?
This is your commission. Can you give commission? You're not allowed to give commission.
No, but that builder can say, okay, instead of giving you the money, I'll give you the money. Yeah, you can't give it to them, but the builder can just hold it and just redistribute it.
In your BBA additional provisions, what I've done in the past, and you might tell me if I
Okay.
is adding a line that says, in the event the seller is offering more than the agreed upon commission, it will be disclosed to the buyer and a new agreement may be coming into place.
I would say that violates this term, which says it's not objectively ascertainable, because it could change. So that's what a lot of people were talking about, again, 21 months ago, about putting like a tiered system in there. If X, then I charge this. If Y, then I charge this, and it becomes non-ascertainable. Is that any more or less ascertainable than saying a percentage of a value we don't know? I don't think so. But I think I would say that might. We had Jace, what's his name? Legal counsel for OAR. I can't remember. The head legal counsel for Oklahoma Association of Realtors was at an event we did 2 years ago, and he was very clear on stuff like that. Like anything that's a tiered system, anything that's a variable system creates an inconsistency with this stipulation, is what his thought was.
So you're telling me that you don't want to put that in there?
I would advise not. You can still do what you're saying you're going to do, but I wouldn't put it in there because I think it creates inconsistency. In the event that you can just say that, have that verbal conversation, but I think putting it in the buyer broker agreement probably violates this stipulation, in my opinion.
I have a question relating to that with how this is written. So like, for example, on my listing agreements, now with, OREC having the option where you can put a buyer broker amount, I always leave it blank and I have kind of like legalese verbiage in the additional provisions just stating that a seller is open to negotiating in the case that an offer contains a cooperative compensation agreement. In that case, does that make that ascertainable?
No, so this is just this is buyers. This only applies to buyers. Listing agreement. Now, they did make stipulations that the listing agreement has to clearly state who's getting paid what.
Correct.
But my recommendation is you just put 0 on the buyer.
Right.
And then
I
set the
think that
expectation.
verbiage is there to cover, like, if they say at the listing appointment, like, oh yeah, I'm open to negotiating a buyer broker agreement, and then we get an offer and they're like, nope, I'm not paying it. Like, they're at least stating in the agreement,
Yeah.
like, I'm open to negotiating.
Yeah.
So that way it's just covering me
Yeah.
from any issues down the road.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was just curious.
Yeah, I think what you're doing is putting it in writing that you had the conversation.
Yes.
Which is fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. You're doing what I advise, which is still put 0, but put that we're going to talk about it.
Right.
That's just the conversation you have to have. And then we have a whole lot of objection handling for whenever you get a cooperative compensation agreement from a buyer. How you explain it to your seller. You should explain it up front at the listing, and then explain it when the buyer comes in. All that too. But yeah, I think to kind of go back to all that. Again, we don't know. None of this has been tried or judicially tested. So we don't know. If I increase it up $5,000 and then I get sued by the buyer a year later because some class action lawsuit called them, and am I going to get in trouble? I don't know. You could argue it both ways. If all the documents are signed, I would probably say no, but I don't know. Did it violate the agreement? Could you be liable under the existing agreement? I don't know. So we just want to make sure there's as much transparency and disclosure as possible when we're changing the amount of money we're already saying we're going to get paid. So really, again, nothing changes except the timing of the buyer-broker agreement. Even if this law is deemed inconsistent with the settlement, you will still need the BBA at the time of contract because you still can't get paid more than what's on the BBA per guidelines. So you will still need it, it just doesn't require it prior to showing real estate. That's all it's doing. So really, even if this is inconsistent, it just moves the timing of the BBA from upfront before a showing to later in the relationship, but prior to contract. The other thing is, if you remember, unilateral offer of compensation is what created procuring cause. Does anyone remember that? What procuring cause is? That's still gone. So if I don't get a BBA and I show 100 houses and Sydney comes in and sells a house with a BBA, I get nothing. Even if I showed him that house and told him what to offer and pulled inspections, did everything, Sydney gets BBA, goes and closes it, I get nothing. There is no procuring cause. It comes down to who gets what in the contract.
I know I got a really stupid question, but that, if you can't have an agreement signed before showing a property and you write a contract on a house that's sight unseen, what, not an agreement before showing it?
That's an agreement at the time of contract. I would think that would be, yeah, allowable. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they're happening simultaneously, I guess. And yeah, I would, yes, so do a BBA. Yeah.
So how should we be managing those of us that charge transaction fees?
Mm-hmm.
Because if I'm charging my buyer that, of course, negotiated 3%, that's more than agreed.
Yeah,
So I put that, what I've been doing is putting the 3% in there plus the transaction.
correct. Yep.
How much is the transaction?
Good question. Two really good questions. So the question was, how does this affect transaction fees? Because remember, you can't get paid more than what's in the buyer-broker agreement. So the OREC buyer-broker agreement and our Copper Creek buyer-broker agreements both have a space for transaction fee. So you'll do a percentage plus transaction fee. The Copper Creek transaction fee is either $150, depending on your commission structure, or $300, depending on where you're at in your commission structure. So it is either $150 or $300. It is $150 for you, Jenna. So it shouldn't change how you're doing transaction fees at all. You should still, on your net to seller, on your cost to buyer, on your listing agreement, on your buyer broker agreement, they should be listed out everywhere. For seller transaction fees on the listing side and for buyer transaction fees on the buyer side. So there is a space for, there's an and or $150. So you still put that on there. Because you can't get paid more than that. So you have to put that on there. Good question. Questions on this, questions on the problem, right? This really doesn't do much for us until we get some additional guidance from the actual governing body that's going to be, that's kind of responsible for carrying out the settlement agreement, right? This is the body, MLSOK and OAR, NAR, that's the governing body to kind of comply, make us comply and carry out the settlement. So we haven't got an opinion from them really on actual practices. Oh, sorry, I'll get you.
So opening up a can of worms with this question, so I'm gonna apologize in advance.
Probably.
But the whole reason why the settlement started, right, was clear cooperation.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think you know where I'm probably about to go with this. But if our state law has changed and MLSOK, I'm not talking about OAR and NAR because you don't have to be a member. Really, the only thing that changes is the liability and the code of ethics. But with MLSOK, that's like the main way that we do business. So how, in requiring us to do a BBA, if it's not state law, is that not creating further clear cooperation?
I don't know if so it's a voluntary trade association.
I get that,
So
but
it's,
the way that we as agents are able to do our job. It's
Yeah.
just like, Century, Secra, all
I mean,
that kind of
it
stuff
gives
has
us-
benefits, but I feel like something like MLSOK would be a huge hindrance to our business.
It's a tool, but it's not the job. It's a tool. I mean, that's been I've long thought NAR, OAR, the associations are the mafia, and they make you join it for this one thing that has value, and then all this other stuff. I think you can make tons of arguments for the value they provide, maybe. But if they didn't have the MLS, none of us would be a member of it. Or very, very few of us would be a member of it. So yeah, you could, clearly that's why we're all a member, but again, legally speaking, it's a tool they offer, and we don't have to use it. The entire commercial industry doesn't have it, right? I don't think there's, again, it's a voluntary trade organization. You don't have to be a member of it. You can go find a brokerage that's, outside of it.
It's voluntary in the same way that like having running water in your house.
Yeah.
It's not really like it is, but also like let's be real.
Yeah. Again, I've long thought the existence of NAR was a violation of antitrust law. But yeah, go ahead.
What is the anticipated date or timeline that we think we'll hear from it?
We don't know. Before November 1st.
Oh, it will be prior to.
It should be before November 1st, yeah. So, and you'll hear about it. It'll be hard to miss. We'll talk about it. We'll have announcements and videos and stuff too. But yeah, so, yeah.
On the MLS opinion, but this bill was pushed by OREC,
Mm-hmm.
which is above MLS.
Mm-hmm.
So why do I care what MLS says? If OREC comes along and says, hey, MLS, you can't make the brokers require these anymore, it's over.
So no, because again, it is the governing body over your license, but OAR, OKMAR, NAR is a voluntary trade association. You are volunteering to be a member of it to get their benefits, which is the MLS. So you must comply as long as it does not violate law, which is we don't know. We don't think it's violating law. We don't know yet.
And that's what I'm saying is if OREC, who pushed this bill, comes along and says, hey, MLS, okay, if you make your members get this agreement in order to show houses, you'll be in violation of the law.
Mm-hmm.
Then it doesn't matter what MLS okay thinks because OREC says you're breaking, and OREC's the one who can send in.
Yeah, see, I don't think OREC will ever make a statement.
They'll have to push administrative rules based on this law.
Should we be contacting OREC?
No, they're not going to do anything. OREC doesn't. Yeah, they're not going to do anything. OREC's not going to go after the MLS. I don't know. I don't know how all that would play out. I don't think it's direct enough to do that. Again, I think it missed the mark to legally be inconsistent, to be at its face 100% inconsistent with the law. I think that's what OAR was trying to do, was change the verbiage so it became 100% inconsistent. But again, I think there's an argument to be made that it's not. And so, yeah, we'll know a lot more when we get some guidance from the MLS. We'll have a lot more. I don't think this is something that just outright, if a law came out that says you can't use the MLS, that's very on its face, obviously a violation of what we're doing, and there would be. But before it went through, there would be guidance from the MLS on how to get over. We're still in that process of we don't know. If you remember, again, from the months of like February to August, everyone was just like freaking out and running around with their hair on fire because there was no guidance yet. There was just this settlement, but we didn't know what was going to be required, what was going to be provided, what was going to be policed. We didn't know anything. And that's kind of where we're at now. This law passed, and we don't really have guidance yet. So I'm really trying to, with this, I want to make sure you understand how we got here, what this is trying to accomplish, what it says, and then what the brokerage's recommendation is for the agents. And so there's a million hypotheticals we can go through with if they're a mafia or not, and what to do and who's in charge. But I think when MLS guidance comes out, because they're the ones that can go around finding people, And then it's like, okay, well, do I take my fine from OREC or do I take my fine from MLS? What do we do? And then I think that it'll work itself out amongst the organizations, I think, but we don't know until we get some guidance from them.
Brent, do we know how many members of the public came forward with
No, I heard someone say that they didn't think. I'll, I'll edit it out. I think I heard that there was maybe one. I don't think they were overwhelmed with it. I think this is more complaints from real estate agents. But then here's the problem is OREC doesn't serve real estate agents. They serve the public. OAR serves real estate agents and they're not doing anything. And so it's like people are doing other people's jobs and they're doing it wrong and bad and it's creating confusion. And so they didn't come out and said we received 55 complaints in the last 3 months. They didn't. That's why they approached legislators, because they felt some frustration in the market. But that's what they say is that we're receiving complaints from consumers.
What would help is if OREC would have just created a non-agreement piece of paper for showings, that's a one-time agreement and not touch the bill.
I think that would still violate the agreement though.
But how, because it's not a requirement into an agreement for compensation, but it's still a piece of paper stating, here's my services to you.
I mean, that's what a BBA is. That's what we have.
But I'm saying the majority of the time when I have a buyer who doesn't want to sign BBA and I just use the console or one-time showing agreement, they're okay with that because they're not wanting to enter an agreement where they say, I'm going to pay you and we're exclusively working together. So
Right.
a non-exclusive agreement just
Yeah.
to provide a service,
Yeah.
where you get into the can of worms of retainer and breaking and all that.
Yeah.
But
And that's the BBA that exists has blanks to create all that. It does create exclusivity. You can strike that out. It does create commission. You can put a 0. It does all those things. The reason we created the one pager is to simplify it. This isn't a 4-page legal contract. It's a funny little document that I need so that we can show this house. Just sign it so that everyone stays out of trouble. And that's why we put the cancellation clause on the bottom. This document has no teeth at all. Just sign it so I stay out of trouble. So OREC could have done that, but they say you can do all that if you just fill it out properly, in the way that you want it to. But yeah, I don't know. I also don't think it's OREC's job to go create a document for everything. There should be a little bit of wiggle room in a lot of them. But okay, a lot of really good hypotheticals that we don't have answers to. Okay, so best practices. This is Copper Creek's official recommendation. If we are currently doing something different than this, we don't have to discuss it here. Let me know, and I want to discuss it with you. But nothing changes. Everything we've been doing for the last 21 months is exactly the same. There might be a change November 1st, depending on what MLS OK and OAR and the associations, what their statement comes out or their opinion is. But as of right now, nothing changes. So I could have just started with that, right? And we could have got out of here an hour ago. But nothing changes. I just like to hear myself talk. So again, number one thing, I don't know what percentage of agents are doing this now or not. Show of hands, who negotiates only their commission on the listing? Or keep that down, hold on. Who puts buyer agent commissions in their listings? Buyer agent commissions, sometimes. Okay. It is. Yeah, you prepare, but you don't put like 3%.
I also tell them, I give them an estimate
That has 3% on it? Yeah. So I think that's good practice. I verbally discuss it with them that, hey, heads up, you're probably going to pay 2 to 3% from a buyer agent. And I put it on the net to seller so you can see, hey, worst case scenario, we pay 3%, but at least you know what the fees look like. But we don't actually agree in the listing agreement. It doesn't say 3% to a buyer. That was what I was asking. Who puts actual percentage to a buyer? You are still? Okay.
As much as possible, because
Okay.
I feel like buyer's agents work hard, and that's what's
Yeah.
gonna be expected of them.
There's a 98% chance that 3% is what they ask for, and that there's a buyer agent. So,
Where the seller agrees for it,
yeah.
however many.
So my recommendation, just again, to comply with the spirit of the agreement, is to get rid of cooperation. So set your expectations, even write it down in their nets, but don't actually put it in your agreement. So what we need to do in our listing agreement is negotiate your fee And then what happens in the event that you procure the buyer? Those are the two things you need to do up front. So in your additional provisions, you just say in the event that listing broker procures buyer, commission will be X. So if you're charging 3 and you want it to be 5 if you get the buyer, put that. So pre-negotiate that so you don't have to negotiate your own fee again later. Renegotiate all your fees up front. But I do not recommend putting the buyer agent's commission in there because, again, I think it violates the spirit, which is to get rid of cooperation. Set all your expectations, have those conversations. I think that's as important as getting them to agree to it, is having the conversations up front. And then touring agreements on every buyer. So again, nothing changes. BBAs when we go in. I love touring agreements. I love the process of a touring agreement. Once you build that rapport, you can flip them into a full buyer broker agreement, or you can use a full touring agreement right up until the time you write an offer on a house. That's kind of what I recommend. The reason is because of what we talked about. If I'm on a touring agreement that has $0, you owe me nothing for 2 months, and then we decide, hey, I want to buy a D.R. Horton house, and they're going to pay me an extra $4,000. Okay, well now I'm writing a full buyer broker agreement with a new scope of work, because it's not just a touring, it's a full buyer now. New scope of work, new compensation structure. And I'm not violating, or there's no gray area about changing my commissions with no new scope of work. So that's my advice, is touring agreement right up until we write the offer. And then I'll know exactly what the price is. I'll know potentially if there's any additional bonuses or what the commission is, and I can write it all up new. And then I send it with my contract, just like we used to do. Questions on that? Make sense? Who's using touring agreements now? Yeah.
So you want the touring agreement with the DBA when we upload all documents, or when do you do it?
When you go under contract and you have a BBA, you don't need to upload the touring agreement because the BBA is newer and takes precedent over it.
I just print them off.
Yeah.
We don't need to keep track of this papers to have you send.
I mean, keep it uploaded to the loop in case someone comes back and says, hey, Kim was showing houses without an agreement. You can say, no, I had an agreement, just a different one. So I'll keep it in dot loop.
Brad, on the touring agreement, it says if you leave the blankets for 30 days.
Yeah.
Can we put something in there that says until, so that every 30 days you don't have to get it?
No, that was a question we asked Jace a long time ago too. It can't be re-extending. It can't be auto-extending. Yeah, yeah, it can't be auto-extending. Or push it out 90 or whatever, but it can't auto-extend.
The reason for
No, I
that
mean-
is it violates Oklahoma contract.
Because it can't be longer than 12 months. So for,
So we can make it longer than 30 days, but it has to be written in that initial agreement.
yeah,
Has to have an end date.
yeah. So yeah, state law says you can't make an agreement longer than 12 months.
Okay.
A real estate agreement longer than 12 months. And it has to have an end date to be a valid agreement. So a listing agreement that is perpetual is not a valid listing agreement.
So can we just put 12 months instead of 3
Mm-hmm.
months?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. It can't be more than 12, but yeah, you can go up to 12 months. Yeah.
I have a question, is I haven't used that form for the last brokerage, the touring agreement was for each showing.
Oh, okay.
Is this, so you're saying that we can do one touring agreement and do it up to 90 days?
Yeah,
But it stays $0, correct?
yeah.
Okay.
If everyone hadn't seen it, let me. Actually, I think I have it on my computer. So this is our limited service touring agreement. So a couple things. It does make the buyer make an acknowledgement that they have not signed another agreement with someone else, so that we don't get in trouble if there is one. The duration defaults for 30 days, but you can put whatever you want. Compensation. No fee for buyer consultation agreement. Broker shall receive no compensation for buyer or any other sources. So it checks all 4 of those stipulations boxes that we said in the beginning. Even if we're charging nothing, it has to comply with all 4 stipulations. So it goes through here, it talks about how it's not set by law, all that stuff. So yeah, you can set it for 30 days and it's just no money. Now, so the main thing and what's important to understand, and the practice that I recommend, is going from the consultation. Where's my zoom? I'm in too far. So going from the consultation agreement, and then when we find a house, flip them over to the full service agreement. And if you'll notice, it has purpose of agreement and services include. And if we go to the full service one, there are additional services included in that. So again, we're changing scope of work and we're changing the compensation. So for showing homes, doing initial consultations, you don't owe me anything. But as soon as you want me to start preparing offer contracts, negotiating terms, coordinating closing processes, then there's a fee for these things. And you change so once we have a house we like, flip it over to a full agreement. And again, both of ours are 1 page. Everything, I took a 4-page document, condensed it down into 1 page. It accomplishes all the same things, creates all the same protections, covers all the same stipulations. I just put the important pieces in. That answer your question? It's not per showing. You can make it a 7-day agreement or a 24-hour agreement, but it defaults for 30 days and you can change it if you want. What else?
How do you feel about retainers?
Graham and I were talking about that the other day. Commission retainers, I know one person that did it. I think, Jenna, didn't some people at Westamine do retainers for a while? Have you heard of this? You hadn't heard? I thought there was like a $350 consultation retainer or something. Did you not hear one?
Was that an option, like on our fireworkers?
I don't know. I mean, it's an option on all of them.
Rebecca?
You hadn't heard of anyone doing it. So I've never actually seen anyone do it.
Sounds complicated.
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing. Not only are you making me sign something, you're making me pay you right now? I don't have it on me.
Yeah, gas isn't free though, and you have a lot of buyers that, I mean, they're not bound to this.
Yeah.
You know, they can
Yeah.
get out of this agreement and
Yeah.
show them, 20 houses and
Yeah.
they recoup nothing.
Yeah, I've long thought that we probably get paid a little too much for the one transaction, but we're getting paid for all the stuff that doesn't come through. So losing deals, losing clients is part of this business. And so you can build stops in like that. You owe me money if you don't close or whatever. I've seen people get bought out of buyer broker agreements. But I always kind of think you're kind of getting overcompensated for when it does close for all the stuff that doesn't close, in my opinion. Sometimes, not always, sometimes. So I think, Jerica, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was just curious if you knew, is this like a trend for all the states, and how has it played out in other states?
I know Colorado has something that's inconsistent with the law. They came out and said you can't sign a buyer broker, or we're not going to. They fought it like immediately. I don't know how it's turned out. I guess fine, because we haven't heard of any lawsuits. But I don't know of any other states that have done it. I haven't looked into it. What? I don't think it's the same language. It would make sense that we go use the same language, but why would we do that? Let's let our geniuses in the Senate use their big brains. So so I don't know. Yeah, it's worked out good so far. We're here, right? All right. If anyone is doing anything different, has any more specific questions, let me know. We will have more guidance coming as we have more guidance from the guidances people. All right, guys. Thank you so much.